Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to have some fun and take a little side trip from the main course. What I'm about to show you, you won't find on any other websites, or you won't find these patterns mentioned or listed anywhere else among the standard solving techniques. These are all my own concoctions. None of them are anything revolutionary, but rather they are a unique and streamlined way to look at certain things that we already know. We're going to look at some special cases for XY chains that you can easily and quickly identify once you know what to look for. Each one is composed of exactly 4 by-value cells. There are 6 patterns in all, and they fall into 2 groups of 3 patterns each. The most powerful of these patterns is called the Swami Quad Loop, and it is capable of producing multiple candidate eliminations in up to 6 houses at the same time. That's right, 6 houses. So without further ado, let's go over to the puzzle board and see what these things look like. Now this lesson will be a little bit like one of my random tips videos, but I think this is the perfect time to squeeze it in. If you haven't seen tutorial number 28 on XY chains, please go back and watch that lesson before continuing here, okay? Now, unlike my other tutorials, there will not be any examples at the end of this video. The initial explanations and demonstrations of the 6 patterns will serve as the examples. I have decided on what I think are some appropriately descriptive names for each of these 6 patterns. The Swami Quad Loop, the Offset Quad Loop, the Swami Quad Snake, the Split Quad Loop, the Butterfly, and the Sandwich. And I think you will agree that these names make sense as soon as you see their construction and see them in action. As I mentioned earlier, each one is an XY chain of exactly 4 by-value cells. First, we're going to look at the granddaddy of them all, the Swami Quad Loop. Let's examine the implications of these 4 by-value cells. Notice that there are exactly 4 different candidates in these 4 cells, and they are evenly distributed in a very particular way. Also notice that the 4 cells form a rectangle. The 4 cells of a Swami Quad Loop will always occupy exactly 2 rows and 2 columns, so it can be in the form of either a rectangle or a perfect square. Let's give these candidates letter names so that we can later apply this principle to any 4 candidates that might be in 4 cells arranged in a similar manner. Let's call the 1A, the 3B, the 5C, and the 7D, okay? So going around clockwise and starting in the upper left, we have AB, BC, CD, and finally DA. Now let's analyze what's really going on here. Because of the particular way these candidates are arranged, we can start in any one of those cells on any one of those candidates and construct an XY chain. Like we can start on the 1 up here in row 1, column 4, and go strong to the 3, then weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong. Remember, in an XY chain, the strong links are within the cells and the weak links are between the cells. And so because the 1s are the 2 endpoints of our chain, we know that one of them must be true. Therefore, any other candidate 1 that can see both of those 1s must be false. And so here in this diagram, it means there cannot be any other 1s in the rest of column 4. So a 1 in any of those red cells would have to be false, right? And likewise, you could start on either one of those 3s in row 1 and make an XY chain that looks like this. So now, because the 3s are the 2 endpoints of our chain, we know that one of them must be true, and therefore any other candidate 3 that can see both of those 3s must be false. So here that means there cannot be any other 3s in the rest of row 1. So a 3 in any of those 7 red cells would also have to be false, right? And just as you've probably guessed, we can make another XY chain starting on either one of those 5s in column 7 that looks like this. And so, of course, one of those 2 5s must be true, which means any other candidate 5 that can see both of them must also be false, which further means there cannot be any other 5s in column 7. So a 5 in any one of those red cells would be false. And lastly, we can make an XY chain starting on either one of those 7s in row 6 that looks like this. And of course, this means that one of those 7s must be true, therefore you can eliminate any other candidate 7 that can see both of them. And that further means that any other candidate 7 in row 6 must also be false. So you could eliminate all those 7s in the red cells. So there are 4 separate XY chains that can be constructed from this configuration. One with the 2 1s or candidate A's as the endpoints, one with the 2 3s or candidate B's as the endpoints, one with the 2 5s or candidate C's as the endpoints, and finally one with the 2 7s or candidate D's as the endpoints. But remember, you can only do this if those 4 candidates are configured AB, BC, CD, and DA. Notice that because of this configuration, you are able to make candidate eliminations in 4 houses. All those candidates in the red cells are false. Of course, you could call any of those candidates candidate A. Like you could call the 5 in R6C7 candidate A, and then the 7 would be candidate B. And then you would proceed clockwise with a weak link over to the 7 in R6C4 and keep going like this. Or you could call the 7 in R6C7 candidate A, and then the 5 would be candidate B, but then you would have to proceed counterclockwise up to the 5 in R1C7 and then proceed from there. It doesn't matter. The end result will be exactly the same regardless of where you start or which direction you go. Now what's also going on here is that this is a continuous loop. I touched on continuous loops for a moment in videos number 27 and 28. The full tutorials on continuous loops will be videos number 38, 39, and 40. But for now, just know that a continuous loop is simply an AIC that circles around or loops right back to where it starts in a perfect fashion with no deviations. Strong, weak, etc. You can even start with a weak link as long as you alternate the links. It doesn't matter because there is no official beginning or end with a continuous loop. Just like the name implies, it is continuous. An open-ended AIC that we learned about in video number 4 has 2 separate endpoints. And in this type of chain, we are usually only concerned about the truth or falsity of those 2 endpoints. But because a continuous loop has no endpoints and just continues round and round in a perfect way, this allows us to draw conclusions and make inferences about all the candidates all along the way at any location throughout the loop. If you remember from videos number 27 and 28, in a continuous loop, all the weak links become effective, strong links. The 4 XY chains that we drew earlier proved this one at a time. For instance, we have already shown that one of those 2 candidate 3s in row 1 must be true, which means there is an effective strong link between them. In the loop, the link between those 3s starts out as a weak link, but it becomes a strong link either by virtue of the XY chain beginning and ending with 3, or because of the continuous loop. Capiche? So because all the weak links in this loop become strong links, we get the same candidate eliminations that we obtained from the 4 XY chains in the 2 rows and the 2 columns. But being able to perceive this as a loop and as a single entity allows you to envision all those eliminations at once instead of having to imagine 4 separate XY chains one at a time. It's much more efficient for you to see it as a whole. Because this perfect AIC loop is continuous, this means that either all those yellow-colored candidates are true and all the blue ones are false, or vice versa. All the blue-colored candidates are true and all the yellow ones are false. The candidates alternate true and false, even though we don't yet know which way it is. But what this does is it allows you to eliminate any candidate that can see two oppositely colored candidates that are all the same digit. By the way, this very important principle will come into play in the next two videos, video number 31 and 32, on simple coloring types 1 and 2. So for instance, here in this diagram, we know that any candidate 5 that can see both the blue 5 and the yellow 5 must be false. But you don't even need to think about that either. All you need to do is recognize the AB, BC, CD, DA relationship, and you will immediately know that the 1s are false in the rest of column 4, the 3s are false in the rest of row 1, the 5s are false in the rest of column 7, and the 7s are false in the rest of row 6. It's a beautiful thing. This is a Swami Quad Loop. These 4 cells can only be solved in one of 2 ways. Because there are only 2 candidates in each cell, if you were to solve any one of those cells, that will dictate what goes in the other 3 cells. Like this. If you solve this first cell for 1, then this cell has to be a 7, that has to be a 5, and that has to be a 3. That's the way it has to be if that first cell is a 1. And if the first cell is a 3, then this cell has to be a 5, that has to be a 7, and that has to be a 1. Those are the only 2 ways those 4 cells can be solved. Starting in the upper left and going clockwise, it can either be A, B, C, and D, or it can be B, C, D, and A. And that's it. Once again, this proves that one of the 2 candidate A's in column 4 must be true, and of course this same logic applies to any one of those 4 candidates respectively. So if the candidates are aligned in exactly this way, you should be able to look at those 4 cells, and because the 2 1s are in column 4, you immediately know that all the other 1s in that column are false. And because the 2 3s are in row 1, you immediately know that all the other 3s in that row are false, and so on and so forth for the 5s in column 7 and the 7s in row 6. Got it? All right, let's take a look at a couple more of these before we go to the next pattern. All right, here we have a Swami Quad Loop. 4 by-value cells that form a rectangle, situated in 2 rows and 2 columns, and we have 4 candidates arranged A, B, B, C, C, D, and D, A going in a clockwise direction. Now remember, when you're checking for the A, B, B, C, C, D, D, A configuration, you can start on any cell and you can start on any candidate. Like for instance, you could start on this cell and call the 5 candidate A and the 1 candidate B, and then you could go BC, CD, DA in a counterclockwise direction, and it would still work. But I think the most natural way to do it is to start in the upper left with candidate 4 being A and candidate 2 being B, and going AB, BC, CD, and DA. So let's stick with that. Now if you want to do it another way, i.e. your own way, that's perfectly fine. It really just depends on which cell you see first. And notice that if you switch any of the cells, it's not going to work. Like let's switch these 2 cells. Let's say this is 1 and 5 and this is 1 and 2. Now all of a sudden, it's not a loop. Now you don't have the A, B, B, C, C, D, D, A configuration anymore. Starting in the upper left, it would be A, B, C, D, B, C, and D, A. And that's not going to work. This is not a loop. The only cells you can link now are the 2 cells in column 2 because they share a candidate 4, and the 2 cells in column 8 because they share a candidate 1. But that won't produce any candidate eliminations. The 2 cells in each row and column must share a common candidate. So let's go back to the way it was. No matter whether you're going clockwise or counterclockwise, the next cell in the loop must contain one of the candidates in the previous cell, otherwise they cannot be linked, capiche? And that common candidate is the one that you can eliminate from the rest of that row or column. So here in this diagram, you can eliminate all the 2s from the rest of row 4, and all the candidate 1s from the rest of column 8, and all the candidate 5s from the rest of row 7, and all the candidate 4s from the rest of column 2. Got it? All right, let's go to the next one. So here we have 4 by-value cells that are situated in 2 rows and 2 columns, and this time they form a perfect square, which is fine. And we've got 4 candidates, AB, BC, CD, and DA. So by now you should quickly realize that you can eliminate the 8s from the rest of row 2, the 2s from the rest of column 8, the 3s from the rest of row 5, and the 6s from the rest of column 5, okay? Now in all the examples so far, the 4 cells have been situated in 4 blocks like this, which allows candidate eliminations in 4 houses, i.e. the 2 rows and 2 columns containing the 4 cells of the pattern. But the 4 cells of a Swami Quad Loop can also lie in 2 blocks, with 2 of the cells in each block, which would be situated in one chute like this. So now, not only can you make eliminations in the 2 rows and the 2 columns, but you can also make eliminations within those 2 blocks. We've got AB, BC, CD, and DA, right? So we know the rest of the 3s are false in row 1, and the rest of the 5s are false in column 8, and the rest of the 9s are false in row 3, and the rest of the 1s are false in column 4. But the 2 1s lie entirely within block 2, and the 2 5s lie entirely within block 3. They are locked because they lie in a column and a block at the same time. And one of those 1s has to be true, and one of those 5s has to be true. So that means we can eliminate the rest of the 1s from block 2 and the rest of the 5s in block 3 as well. You see? And so altogether, from this Swami Quad Loop, we get all these eliminations. You can eliminate all those candidates from all those red cells. Now, of course, there's probably not going to be an instance of all those candidates in all those red cells. This is just a demonstration. I marked those cells red to show you where candidate eliminations are possible, but there may only be 1 or 2 of those candidates there. And also in blocks 2 and 3 here, you'll see a few red cells that look like they're by-value cells, and of course that can't be. Like in block 3, there can't be 3 cells with only a 5 and a 9 in them. That would be impossible. The only cells that are real in this puzzle are the 4 green cells of our pattern. The rest of the cells are just for demonstration. This is not a real puzzle. All right, let's do one more like this. Okay, here we have another Swami Quad Loop. We've got 4 by-value cells that lie in 2 rows and 2 columns, and again this time they lie in one chute with 2 cells in each of 2 blocks. So they look like this: AB, BC, CD, and DA. All right, so now we know we can eliminate the rest of the 4s from row 1, and the rest of the 7s from column 3, the rest of the 3s from row 8, and the rest of the 2s from column 1. But because the 4s are locked in block 1 and the 3s are locked in block 7, you can also eliminate all the 4s from the rest of block 1 and all the 3s from the rest of block 7, like this. So when the 4 cells of the pattern lie in 2 blocks and in one chute, like you see here, that allows you to make candidate eliminations in all 6 of those houses. And then finally, a Swami Quad Loop can also lie entirely within one block, like this. As long as you've got the AB, BC, CD, and DA thing going on, clockwise or counterclockwise, it's going to work. Now don't forget, you can't go diagonally. You've got to go around in a circle either clockwise or counterclockwise. So as usual, we've got 4 by-value cells in 2 rows and 2 columns. So we know that the rest of the 3s in row 1 must be false, and the rest of the 5s in column 3 must be false, and the rest of the 7s in row 3 must be false, and the rest of the ones in column 1 must be false. But because all 4 of those candidates lie in one block, they are also a naked quad, which means you can eliminate 1, 3, 5, and 7 from the other 5 cells in that block. So when the 4 cells of the Swami Quad Loop lie entirely within one block, you can make candidate eliminations in 5 houses: the 2 rows, the 2 columns, and the block, like this. So you can eliminate the 3s from row 1, the 7s from row 3, the 1s from column 1, and the 5s from column 3, but you can eliminate all 4 of those candidates from this block. So you can eliminate 1, 3, 5, and 7 from all 5 of those cells. And of course, there are going to be other various candidates in all those cells. This is just for demonstration purposes only. But the 1s, 3s, 5s, and 7s cannot be true in any of those red cells where they are marked. All right, let's do one more and then we'll do a review. All right, once again, we've got 4 by-value cells that lie in 2 rows and 2 columns. We've got 4 candidates with the configuration AB, BC, CD, and DA. So we know there cannot be any other 3s in row 4, there cannot be any other 6s in row 5, there cannot be any other 2s in column 5, and there cannot be any other 8s in column 6. And in addition to those 4 houses, we can eliminate the 2, the 3, the 6, and the 8 from the other 5 cells in block 5, like this. This can't be a 2, 3, 6, or 8. And that can't be a 2, 3, 6, or 8. And none of these can be a 2, 3, 6, or 8. Okay? That's because of the naked quad, in addition to the Swami Quad Loop. And then from our loop, we also have these candidate eliminations. Does everybody get that? All right, so now let's review the characteristics of a Swami Quad Loop. All right, so what you're looking for are 4 by-value cells that form a rectangle or a perfect square. So of course, they will lie in 2 rows and 2 columns. The 4 by-value cells can lie in 4 blocks, 2 blocks, or in only 1 block. And the 4 candidates in those 4 cells must be arranged in the following way: AB, BC, CD, and DA, going either clockwise or counterclockwise. And if the 4 cells lie in 4 blocks, you can make candidate eliminations in 4 houses. And if they lie in only 1 block, you can make candidate eliminations in 5 houses. And if they lie in 2 blocks, you can make candidate eliminations in all 6 houses. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now this video turned out to be a little bit longer than I had planned, so I'm going to end it here and we're going to call this part 1. And the other 5 patterns we will cover in part 2, okay? And I also want to apologize for my sound today. The wind has been blowing and it's been pouring down rain, and I know there's been a lot of background noise, and I really apologize for that. But I wanted to get at least this much done today, so we're just going to have to deal with it. All right, so that's it for now, and I'll see you in part 2. Thanks for watching.